The boarding house smelled like boiled cabbage and broken promises. I sat on the edge of my narrow bed, staring at the scrap of paper Mrs. Pemberton had shoved into my hand an hour ago. The address was written in her sharp, slanted handwriting, Calder Ranch, 4 miles north, past the old mill. Behind me, I could hear them, Lucille, Margaret, and that vicious little blonde whose name I never bothered learning. Their laughter sliced through the thin walls like knives. "Did you see her face?" Margaret's voice carried, high and delighted. "She actually thinks she has a choice." Rhett Calder. Lucille's tone dropped to a theatrical whisper. "They say he beat a man half to death last year over a horse." "Over nothing," the blonde corrected. "That's the point. He's a monster." More laughter. Sharp. Cutting. I folded the paper carefully and tucked it into my apron pocket. My hands didn't shake. They'd stopped shaking a long time ago, somewhere between St. Louis and the dusty hellhole of a town I'd washed up in 6 months back. The truth was simple. I had $8 to my name, no family, and a reputation that preceded me everywhere I went. The fat girl, the charity case, the one nobody wants. Mrs. Pemberton made it clear this morning. Pay rent or get out. The only work available was at Calder Ranch, and nobody wanted that job. So they gave it to me. I stood, smoothed down my skirt, and walked out of that room without looking back. The walk to Calder Ranch took 2 hours. The road turned from packed dirt to loose gravel, then to nothing but dried mud and wild grass. The sun hammered down on my shoulders, and my boots, already worn thin, raised blisters on both heels within the first mile. I didn't stop. Stopping meant thinking. Thinking meant remembering, and remembering meant I'd turn around. So I kept walking. The ranch appeared suddenly, rising out of the flat plains like something pulled from a fever dream. It wasn't grand, not like the estates I'd heard about back east, but it was big, sprawling. A main house with peeling paint and a sagging porch. A barn that looked like it was held together by anger and spite. Fences that ran in crooked lines toward the horizon. And standing in front of the barn, arms crossed, was Rhett Calder. I'd heard the stories, of course. Everyone had. 6'4", built like a bull. Eyes cold enough to freeze whiskey, killed a man in a fight when he was 17. Hasn't smiled in a decade. The rumors painted him as something barely human, a creature made of violence and rage. A man to be feared, avoided, whispered about in the dark. But standing there in the dusty yard, watching me approach, he just looked tired. His shirt was streaked with dirt and sweat. His jaw was shadowed with several days' worth of stubble. His dark hair stuck to his forehead in damp strands. And his eyes, though supposedly terrifying eyes, watched me with the kind of flat, exhausted suspicion of someone who'd been disappointed too many times to expect anything different. "You the girl Pemberton sent?" His voice was rough, low, not unkind, just empty. "Yes, sir." I stopped a few feet away, kept my chin level. "Clara Bell." He looked me over. I waited for it. The sneer, the laugh, the dismissal. I'd seen it 1,000 times, that look. The one that said I wasn't worth the space I took up. But Rhett just nodded once. "Barn needs cleaning, stalls, tack room, loft, everything." He turned, gestured vaguely toward the structure behind him. "You break something, you fix it. You steal something, you're gone. You slack off, same thing. Understand?" "Yes, sir. Pays $2 a week. Meals included if you're here past sundown." He paused, eyes narrowing slightly. "You scared?" I met his gaze dead on. Should I be? Something flickered across his face, surprise maybe, or curiosity. It was gone before I could name it. "No," he said finally, "long as you do the work." He walked away without another word, disappearing into the house and letting the door slam behind him. I stood there for a moment, alone in the yard, listening to the wind rattle through the fence posts. Then I turned toward the barn. The inside was worse than I expected. Months, maybe years, of neglect had turned the place into a disaster. Stalls were packed with soiled straw that reeked of ammonia and rot. Tools lay scattered and rusted across the dirt floor. Saddles hung crooked on broken hooks, their leather cracked and covered in dust. The loft above groaned ominously, boards sagging under the weight of forgotten junk. I stood in the doorway, taking it all in. This wasn't a job. This was a punishment. They'd sent me here to fail, to break, to give them another story to laugh about over dinner. Poor Clara. Couldn't even handle barn work. I felt the familiar burn start in my chest. The anger, the shame, the crushing weight of being unwanted. Then I pushed it down. I'd been unwanted before. I grabbed a pitchfork from the wall. Fork. By the time the sun started its slow descent, I'd cleared 3 stalls. My arms screamed. My back felt like it had been beaten with a club. Sweat soaked through my dress and dripped into my eyes, stinging and blurring my vision. The blisters on my heels had burst, leaving wet spots of blood on my stockings. But 3 stalls were clean. I didn't hear Red approach. One moment I was alone, hauling another load of fouled straw toward the burn pile, and the next he was standing at the barn entrance, watching. I stopped, pitchfork still in hand, and waited. He didn't say anything, just looked past me, into the barn. His expression didn't change. Then he turned and walked back to the house. No praise, no acknowledgement, nothing. I went back to work. Dinner was bread, beans, and coffee so strong it could strip paint. Rhett set the plate in front of me without ceremony, then took his own seat across the scarred kitchen table. We ate in silence. The only sounds were the scrape of spoons against tin and the distant howl of wind outside. I was halfway through the beans when he spoke. "You always work like that?" I looked up. He wasn't watching me. His eyes were fixed on his own plate. But the question hung in the air between us. "Like what? Like something's chasing you." I set my spoon down carefully. "I work until the job's done. Nobody works that hard for $2 a week." "Then nobody needs the $2 as bad as I do." That got his attention. His eyes lifted, met mine. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. "You running from something?" he asked. "Aren't we all?" His mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but something close. "Fair enough." He went back to eating. I did the same. After a while, he spoke again. "You can stay in the loft. There's a cot up there. Cleaner than the boarding house, probably." I blinked. I wasn't... 2-hour walk each way is a waste of daylight, he said flatly. "You're here. You work. Makes sense. You stay." It wasn't kindness. It was practicality. But in that moment, I didn't care about the difference. "Thank you," he grunted. "Don't thank me yet. You might not last the week." So I lasted. 1 week became 2. 2 became 3. The barn slowly transformed under my hands. Stalls gleamed. Tools were sharpened, oiled, organized. The loft was cleared, swept, turned into something almost livable. I fixed broken fence posts, hauled water, mucked out the pig pen, scrubbed the chicken coop until it didn't smell like death. Rhett watched. He never said much, but I felt his eyes on me, measuring, evaluating, waiting for me to quit. I didn't. At night, lying on the cot in the loft, I'd hear him moving around downstairs. Sometimes he'd work late into the darkness, hammering at something in the workshop or checking the horses. Other times, I'd hear nothing but the creak of his chair and the clink of a bottle. He was lonely. The realization hit me one evening as I watched him standing at the fence line, staring out at nothing. This big, terrifying man everyone feared. He was just alone, like me. The first time I saw his temper, I understood why people were afraid. A supply merchant came by on a Tuesday afternoon, a weaselly man with a thin mustache and a voice like grease. "Calder," he called out, climbing down from his wagon. "Got your order. That'll be $18. Rhett walked out from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. "I ordered $15 worth. Prices went up." The merchant smiled, showing yellow teeth. "Can't help that. Prices were set last month." Well, things change. I watched from the barn entrance as Rhett went very, very still. "You trying to cheat me, Harris?" The merchant's smile faltered. "Now, Rhett, I wouldn't—" "You think I'm stupid?" Rhett's voice dropped, quiet and dangerous. "You think I don't know what I ordered? I'm just saying." Rhett moved fast. One moment he was 10 feet away, the next he had Harris by the shirt, lifted half off his feet. "You're just saying you're a thief," Rhett said softly. "Aren't you?" Harris went white. I might have made a mistake, might have definitely made a mistake." The words tumbled out in a rush. $15. That's right, 15. Rhett held him a moment longer, then released him. Harris stumbled backward, nearly falling. "Get off my property!" The merchant scrambled into his wagon and was gone in a cloud of dust. Rhett stood there, breathing hard, hands clenched into fists. Then he turned and saw me watching. For a second, something vulnerable crossed his face. Shame, maybe. Or embarrassment. "You scared now?" he asked roughly. I thought about it, honestly considered the question. "No," I said finally. "He was stealing from you." Rhett stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. "Most people would have run." "I'm not most people." The corner of his mouth lifted, just barely. "No, you're not." The trouble started in the 4th week. I was in town picking up supplies, flour, sugar, coffee, nails. Rhett had given me a list and enough money to cover it, plus a little extra. "Get yourself something," he'd said gruffly, not meeting my eyes. "You've earned it." I was standing at the counter of Morrison's general store when I heard the whispers start. "That's her. The one staying at Calder's place. Alone with him. Can you imagine?" I kept my eyes on the clerk, who was carefully avoiding looking at me while he tallied up my purchases. "I heard she sleeps in the barn," one woman said, her voice dripping with false concern. "Poor thing, what he must be doing to her." "She's probably willing," another voice cut in. Lucille. I'd recognize that vicious little laugh anywhere. "Look at her. Where else would she find a man?" The clerk's hands fumbled with the sugar bag. I pulled out Rhett's money, counted it carefully, and laid it on the counter. "That everything?" I asked quietly. The clerk nodded, still not looking at me. I gathered the supplies and walked out. Behind me, the whispers grew louder, meaner. I kept walking. Oops. I didn't tell Rhett. What would I say? That people talked? He already knew. That they lied? Of course they did. That they looked at me and saw nothing worth defending? That wasn't news. But something shifted after that day in town. Rhett started asking more questions. Where I'd been, who I'd talked to, if anyone had bothered me. "No one bothers me," I'd say. He'd give me that look. The one that said he didn't believe me, but wouldn't push. One evening, as we sat on the porch after dinner, he broke the silence. "Why'd you come here?" I looked at him, surprised. "You hired me." "That's not what I'm asking." I turned my attention back to the horizon, where the sun was bleeding red across the sky. I didn't have anywhere else to go. "No family?" "No." "Friends?" I laughed. It came out bitter. "Do I look like someone with friends?" "You look like someone who works hard and doesn't complain," Rhett said. "That's worth more than friends." Something in my chest twisted. "Why do you stay here?" I asked. "Out here. Alone." He was quiet for a long time, then, "Because people are terrible." "Not all of them." "Enough of them." I couldn't argue with that. We sat in silence as the sun disappeared and the stars began to emerge, sharp and cold against the darkening sky. "You're good at this," Rhett said suddenly. "At what?" "Being here. Working. Not—" He struggled for words. "Not needing things." "I need plenty of things," I said. "I'm just used to not getting them." He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw something in his expression I couldn't name. "That's going to change," he said. I didn't know what he meant. Not yet. The ranch began to hum with a kind of rhythm I'd never known before. Early mornings, I'd wake before dawn and start the fire in the kitchen stove. Rhett would appear like clockwork, silent and rumpled, and we'd eat breakfast without talking. Then we'd split up, him to the fields or the horses, me to whatever needed doing. Repairs, cleaning, feeding. The work was endless, but it had a shape, a purpose. For the first time in my life, I felt useful. At night, we'd sit on the porch and talk. Not about anything important, just talk. About the weather, the horses, the leak in the barn roof that needed fixing before winter. Small things, normal things, things I'd never had before. One night, Rhett asked, "You ever think about leaving?" The question caught me off guard. "Leaving here?" "Yeah." I considered it, honestly. Where would I go? Somewhere better than this. "Is there somewhere better?" He smiled. It was a strange sight. Rhett Calder, smiling. It made him look younger, less burdened. Probably not, he admitted. Then I guess I'll stay. Something passed between us in that moment. An understanding, an agreement. We were both broken things, but maybe, together, we could be something resembling whole. The storm arrived on a Saturday. Not a weather storm, though there was that too, rain lashing against the windows and wind howling through the gaps in the barn walls. No, this storm came in the form of Mrs. Pemberton and 3 women from the church, rolling up to the ranch in a hired carriage like they were on some kind of righteous mission. I saw them coming from the barn, and my stomach dropped. Rhett was in the house. I could warn him, or I could face this myself. I chose myself. I walked out into the rain, stood in the yard as they climbed down from the carriage. Mrs. Pemberton's face was pinched with disapproval. The other women clustered behind her like a flock of judgmental birds. "Clara Bell," Mrs. Pemberton announced. "We've come to take you back." "I'm not going back." "You don't have a choice, girl. This arrangement is inappropriate, sinful. You're living here, alone, with a man. I'm working here," I said, "same as any ranch hand." "You're a woman," one of the other ladies hissed. "It's indecent." "What's indecent," I said slowly, "is you showing up uninvited to tell me how to live my life." Mrs. Pemberton's eyes narrowed. "I'm responsible for you. You came to my boarding house, and I paid my rent. I don't owe you anything." "You owe—" "She doesn't owe you a damn thing." Rhett's voice cut through the rain like a blade. He stood on the porch, water dripping from the eaves behind him, and he looked every inch the dangerous man the rumors claimed him to be. "This is none of your concern, Mr. Calder," Mrs. Pemberton said, but her voice wavered. "She's on my property. That makes it my concern. We're trying to protect her." "From what?" Rhett descended the porch steps slowly, deliberately. "From honest work? From having a roof over her head? From being treated with respect?" The women shifted uncomfortably. "From you," Mrs. Pemberton said, rallying. "From whatever ungodly things are happening here." Rhett smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Nothing ungodly is happening here," he said softly. "Clara works harder than any man I've ever hired. She's earned every cent I've paid her, and she's earned the right to decide where she wants to be." He looked past them, to me. "So ask her. Ask her if she wants to go back to your boarding house, where she slept in a closet and got treated like garbage." All eyes turned to me. I was soaked through, trembling. From cold or anger or fear, I couldn't tell. But I knew my answer. "I'm staying." Mrs. Pemberton's face flushed red. "You're making a mistake." "It's my mistake to make." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Mrs. Pemberton turned sharply and climbed back into the carriage. The other women followed, throwing scandalized looks over their shoulders. As they drove away, Rhett walked over to stand beside me in the rain. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Good." He turned back toward the house. "Come on. You're soaked." I followed him inside. As I stood by the stove, warming my hands and dripping water onto the floor, Rhett brought me a blanket. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for out there." He shrugged. "Told you. You've earned it." "That's not what I mean." He met my eyes. "I know." We stood there, the rain drumming on the roof, the fire crackling in the stove. "Clara," he said finally, "I need to ask you something." My heart kicked against my ribs. "What?" He looked uncomfortable, uncertain. It was strange seeing this big, terrifying man struggle for words. "This arrangement, you working here, staying here, it's—" He stopped. Started again. "People are going to talk. They're not going to stop. It's going to get worse." "I know." "So I was thinking," he ran a hand through his wet hair, "maybe we make it official." I stared at him. "Official?" "Not like that," he said quickly, then paused. "Or maybe like that. I don't know. I'm not good at this." "Rhett, you could stay," he said, "permanently. Not as a worker, as a partner. Someone who runs this place with me. Someone who—" He swallowed. "Someone who matters." The words hung between us. "You don't have to decide now," he added. "Just think about it." I didn't need to think about it. Yes. He blinked. Yes? Yes. I'll stay. I took a breath. I'll be your partner. The look on his face, shock, relief, something that might have been joy, was worth every cruel word, every dismissive look, every moment of loneliness I'd ever endured. Yeah, he said, like he couldn't quite believe it. Yeah. And just like that, everything changed. The girl they'd sent as a joke, the one no one wanted, the one they'd expected to fail. I'd found my place, not in spite of being broken, but because of it. The rain stopped sometime before dawn, leaving the world clean and raw. Clara woke to pale light filtering through the loft window and the sound of Rhett already moving around downstairs. She lay still for a moment, letting the events of yesterday settle over her like dust. She'd said yes. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, she felt something close to calm, not happiness, that seemed too fragile, too easy to break, but certainty. For the first time in her life, she'd chosen something for herself, and it felt right in a way nothing else ever had. She climbed down from the loft, her muscles protesting. The work hadn't gotten easier, but her body had adapted, grown stronger. Her hands were calloused now, her arms lean with muscles she'd never had before. Rhett was at the stove when she entered the kitchen, cracking eggs into a pan with more force than necessary. He didn't look up. "Coffee's ready," he said. "Thanks." She poured herself a cup, watching him from the corner of her eye. He seemed tense, his shoulders tight, movements jerky, like he regretted what he'd said, like he was waiting for her to take it back. "Rhett." "Yeah?" "I meant it. Yesterday. My answer." His hands stilled. Then he nodded once, sharply. "Good." That was all. But the tension in his shoulders eased, and when he finally looked at her, something in his expression had softened. They ate breakfast in their usual silence, but it felt different now, weighted with possibility. Afterward, Rhett pushed his plate away and cleared his throat. "We should go into town today." Clara's stomach tightened. "Why?" "Need to make it official. Legal." He wouldn't meet her eyes. "Marriage license, unless you'd rather not." "No, I mean, yes. We should." She took a breath. "When?" "This afternoon. Give us time to finish morning chores first." Clara nodded, though her heart was hammering. Marriage. She'd never thought about it before, never imagined anyone would want that with her. And this wasn't some romantic proposal. It was practical, protective, a way to silence the gossip and secure her place. But it was still more than she'd ever expected to have. "Okay," she said, "this afternoon." The morning passed in a blur of work. Clara mucked out stalls with unusual vigor, trying to burn off the nervous energy building in her chest. Rhett worked on the fence line, hammering posts with more violence than strictly necessary. They didn't talk about it. There wasn't much to say. By noon, Clara had changed into her only decent dress, a simple gray thing that hung loose on her frame. She'd lost weight since arriving at the ranch, though she was still what people politely called heavyset. She tried to do something with her hair, gave up, and settled for pulling it back in a severe bun. When she came downstairs, Rhett was waiting by the wagon, wearing a clean shirt and looking deeply uncomfortable. "Ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be." The ride into town was quiet. The road was muddy from yesterday's rain, and the wagon wheels churned through it with wet, sucking sounds. Clara kept her hands folded in her lap, watching the landscape roll by. "You nervous?" Rhett asked suddenly. "Are you?" He huffed out something that might have been a laugh. "Terrified." The honesty surprised her. "Why?" "Because I'm about to tie myself to another person for the rest of my life, and I've never been particularly good with people." "You've been good with me." He glanced at her, expression unreadable. "You're different." "Because I work hard?" "Because you don't expect things from me." He turned his attention back to the road. "Everyone else looks at me and sees what they want to see. A monster, a brute, someone to be scared of or use or avoid. You just see me." Clara's throat tightened. "You see me too, not the fat girl everyone laughs at, just me." "Exactly." They fell silent again, but it was comfortable now, an understanding passing between them without need for more words. Town appeared on the horizon, a cluster of buildings squatting in the dust like they were ashamed to be there, As they rolled down the main street, Clara saw curtains twitch in windows. People stopped on the boardwalk to stare. "Ignore them," Rhett said quietly. "I always do." The county clerk's office was a cramped room above the general store. The clerk himself was a dried-up man named Horace who looked at them over his spectacles like they were something unpleasant he'd found on his shoe. "Marriage license," Rhett said, his voice flat. Horace's eyebrows climbed toward his receding hairline. "You and her? Problem with that?" No problem. Just unexpected." Horace pulled out a ledger, licking his fingers before turning pages. "Names? Rhett Calder, Clara Bell." Horace scratched the information down with agonizing slowness. "Ages?" 28, Rhett said. "She's 23. Clara nodded when Horace looked at her for confirmation. "Any impediments to marriage? Existing spouses, blood relation, that sort of thing?" "No." More scratching. Horace pulled out an official-looking form, filled in the blanks, then pushed it across the desk. "Sign here, both of you." Rhett signed first, his handwriting surprisingly neat. Then Clara took the pen, her hand trembling slightly as she wrote her name. Clara Bell. Soon to be Clara Calder. The thought made something flutter in her chest. "That'll be $3, Horace said. Rhett paid without comment. "You need someone to perform the ceremony," Horace added. "Judge Morrison does them on Saturdays. He's probably at the saloon right now." Fine. They found Judge Morrison exactly where Horace said he'd be, nursing a whiskey at a corner table. He was a broad man with a red face and shrewd eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. "Rhett Calder," he said as they approached. "Didn't expect to see you in here, not without breaking something. I need you to perform a marriage." Morrison's eyes slid to Clara, then back to Rhett. "Her? Yes." "She aware of what she's getting into?" "I am," Clara said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. Morrison studied her for a long moment. Then he tossed back the rest of his whiskey and stood. "All right, let's make it official." They stood in front of Morrison's table. No church, no flowers, no witnesses except a few curious drinkers who'd turned to watch. Morrison pulled out a battered book and flipped it open. "Dearly beloved," he began, then stopped. "Actually, let's skip the speech. You two want to be married? Yes or no?" "Yes," Rhett said. "Yes," Clara echoed. "Good enough. Rhett Calder, do you take this woman as your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "Clara Bell, do you take this man as your lawfully wedded husband?" Clara looked at Rhett. He was staring straight ahead, jaw tight, but his hand found hers and squeezed. "I do." "Then by the power vested in me by this territory, I pronounce you man and wife. Kiss her if you want, or don't. I don't care. Either way, you're married." Morrison slammed the book shut. That was it. No music, no celebration, no tears of joy, just a transaction completed in a dusty saloon with whiskey fumes hanging in the air. Rhett handed Morrison $5, twice what he'd asked for, and turned to Clara. "Let's go home," he said. Home. The word settled over Clara like a blanket. They were halfway to the wagon when a voice called out behind them. "Rhett Calder, hold up!" Clara turned to see a tall man in expensive clothes striding toward them. He had the look of someone who'd never missed a meal or worried about money, soft hands, clean boots, an easy confidence that came from privilege. Rhett's expression went cold. "Marcus. Heard a rumor you'd gotten yourself hitched. Couldn't believe it." Marcus's eyes slid over Clara with obvious disdain. "But here we are. What do you want?" "Just being neighborly, congratulating you on your bride." The word dripped with mockery. "We're leaving." "Course you are. Wouldn't want to subject her to civilized company too long." Marcus smiled, showing perfect teeth. "Though I suppose she's used to being an outsider. Birds of a feather and all that." Rhett moved so fast Clara barely saw it. One moment Marcus was smirking, the next he was against the wall with Rhett's forearm across his throat. "Say whatever you want about me," Rhett said quietly. "But you speak about my wife with respect, or I'll break every bone in your face. Understood?" Marcus's eyes bulged. He managed a strangled nod. Rhett released him and stepped back. "Stay away from us." He took Clara's arm and led her to the wagon. Behind them, Marcus coughed and wheezed, but he didn't follow. Clara waited until they were out of town before speaking. Who was that? Marcus Thornton. Owns the big ranch south of here. We grew up together, more or less. Rhett's knuckles were white on the reins. He's always been a bastard. What did he mean, birds of a feather? Rhett was quiet for a long time. Then, my father was the town drunk. Beat my mother until she died when I was 12. I took care of him until he drank himself to death 5 years later. Marcus never let me forget where I came from. He glanced at her. Same way people never let you forget they think you're not good enough. Clara's chest ached. I'm sorry. Don't be. I stopped caring what people like him think a long time ago. He paused. You should too. I'm trying. Try harder. You're a Calder now. That means something. The pride in his voice startled her, made something warm unfurl in her chest. They rode in silence for a while, the ranch growing larger on the horizon. Clara watched Rhett from the corner of her eye, this hard, angry man who'd just defended her honor like it mattered, like she mattered. Thank you, she said quietly, for what you said about respecting me. I meant it. I know. That's what makes it matter. When they reached the ranch, Rhett helped her down from the wagon, an old-fashioned gesture that felt oddly formal. They stood in the yard, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the dirt. So, Rhett said, you're my wife now. I am. Things are going to be different. How? He rubbed the back of his neck, looking uncomfortable. I don't know exactly. I've never done this before. Neither have I. Right. He took a breath. I moved your things into the house, the spare room. Figured you'd want your own space. Clara blinked. She'd expected, well, she wasn't sure what she'd expected, but having her own room hadn't occurred to her. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. This is your home now. You should be comfortable. He shifted his weight. Unless you'd rather stay in the loft. No, the house is... Thank you. They stood there awkwardly, two people bound by law but still strangers in so many ways. I should start dinner, Clara said finally. I'll feed the horses. They separated to their tasks, falling into the familiar rhythm of work. But everything felt slightly different now, charged with a new awareness. Clara cooked stew while Rhett tended the animals. When he came back in, she had the table set and coffee brewing. They ate together, just like always, but Clara was acutely aware of every small movement, the way Rhett's hand brushed hers when he reached for the salt, the way his eyes followed her when she got up to get more bread. After dinner, they sat on the porch. The sky was turning purple, stars beginning to emerge. Clara, Rhett said after a while, I need you to understand something. She looked at him, waiting. I'm not good at feelings, or talking, or any of the things people expect in a marriage. He stared out at the darkness. But I'll work hard. I'll provide for you. I'll protect you. And I'll never hurt you. That's what I can promise. That's more than most people get, Clara said softly. Is it enough? She thought about it. Really thought. Yes, it's enough. Relief crossed his face. Good. They sat in silence, but it was comfortable. Easy. The kind of quiet that didn't need filling. Eventually, Rhett stood. I'm turning in. You need anything before I do? No, I'm fine. Good night, then. Good night. She watched him disappear into the house, heard his heavy footsteps on the stairs. Then she was alone with the night sounds, crickets, wind, the distant howl of a coyote. Clara Calder, she thought, wife of Rhett Calder, mistress of this ranch. It didn't feel real yet, but it would. The next few days passed in a strange limbo. Clara and Rhett fell back into their work routines, but everything had shifted slightly. They were more aware of each other, more careful. At night, Clara would lie in her new room, a simple space with a real bed and a window that looked out over the pasture, and listen to Rhett moving around in his own room across the hall. Sometimes she heard him pacing. Other times, nothing at all. She wondered what he was thinking. If he regretted marrying her. If he was waiting for her to fail, to prove she wasn't worth the trouble. But he never said anything. Just worked alongside her, quiet and steady, a constant presence. On the fourth day, a wagon rolled up to the house. Clara was in the garden. Rhett had plowed a small plot for vegetables, and she was trying to coax life out of the stubborn soil. When she heard voices, she stood, wiping dirt from her hands, and saw 3 women climbing down from the wagon, not the church ladies. These were younger, dressed in faded calico and worn boots. Ranch wives, Clara guessed. Women who knew what hard work looked like. The tallest one spotted Clara and waved. "You Clara Calder?" "I am." "Thought so. I'm Beth Cooper. This is Ann Miller and Sarah Lawson. We heard you got married." Clara braced herself for whatever came next. Judgment, mockery, pity. But Beth just smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. "Figured you could use some help getting settled, and maybe some company that isn't that grumpy husband of yours." Clara stared at her. "You want to help me? Why not? We're neighbors." "Sort of. My husband's ranch is about 8 miles east." Beth gestured to the others. "Ann's place is north, Sarah's west. We look out for each other out here." "I don't understand." Ann stepped forward, a small woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. "Listen, honey. We all know what it's like being the new wife on a ranch. It's lonely. It's hard. And men like Rhett Calder don't exactly make it easier." She smiled. "But you're one of us now, so we help." Something in Clara's chest cracked open. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes to coffee," Sarah suggested. She was younger than the others, barely out of her teens, with a quick smile. "I brought fresh bread." They spent the afternoon in Clara's kitchen, a kitchen that still didn't quite feel like hers. Beth and Ann showed her how to make soap from lye and fat, how to preserve vegetables for winter, how to patch work shirts so they'd last another season. Sarah entertained them with stories about her husband's attempts at cooking, which apparently nearly burned down their barn. For the first time since arriving in this territory, Clara laughed. Really laughed. When Rhett came in for dinner, he stopped short at the sight of 4 women crowded around his kitchen table. "Rhett," Beth said cheerfully, don't look so terrified. We're just visiting your wife." "I can see that." He looked at Clara. "Everything okay?" "Everything's fine." He nodded slowly, clearly out of his depth, and retreated to wash up. The women left before sunset, but not before extracting a promise from Clara to visit Beth's place the following week. "You need friends," Beth said firmly. "And we need someone who isn't afraid of Rhett Calder. Lord knows he scares most people half to death." After they left, Rhett and Clara ate dinner in the now familiar quiet. "They seem nice," Rhett offered. "They are." "You should go, next week, to Beth's place." Clara looked up, surprised. "You don't mind?" "Why would I mind? It's good. Having people." He paused. "For you, I mean." "What about you? Do you have people?" He shrugged. "I have you." The simplicity of it hit Clara hard. This man, who everyone feared and avoided, had chosen her. Not because she was beautiful or charming or came from a good family, but because she'd stayed when everyone else ran, because she saw him as human. "Yes," she said, "you have me." That night, Clara lay in bed thinking about the afternoon, about Beth's easy laughter, Ann's practical wisdom, Sarah's youthful energy, about having friends for the first time in years, about having a life. A soft knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. "Clara, you awake?" "Yes." Rhett opened the door but didn't come in, just stood in the doorway, backlit by lamplight from the hall. "I wanted to say, I'm glad they came, the women. Me too. And I'm glad you're here, in case that wasn't clear." Clara sat up. "It wasn't, actually." He frowned. "I married you, didn't I? For practical reasons, to stop gossip. That was part of it," he admitted, "but not all of it." "What was the rest?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I like having you here. I like that you don't flinch when I get angry. I like that you work hard and don't complain. I like—" He stopped, searching for words. "I like who I am when you're around. I'm less angry, less alone." Clara's breath caught. "I'm not good at this," Rhett continued, "at saying things. But I wanted you to know. You're not just convenient. You matter." Before Clara could respond, he'd closed the door and retreated to his own room. She lay back down, her heart pounding. You matter. 2 words. Simple. Honest. More than anyone had ever given her before. The days began to blur together in the best possible way. Clara fell into the rhythm of ranch life, feeding chickens, tending the garden, helping Rhett with repairs and livestock. The work was still hard, but it felt different now, purposeful, like she was building something instead of just surviving. Beth, Anne, and Sarah became regular visitors, stopping by with food or advice or just company. In return, Clara helped them when she could, mending torn dresses, sharing vegetables from her garden, listening when they needed to talk. She was building a life, a real one, but not everyone was happy about it. The trouble came on a Saturday morning 3 weeks after the wedding. Clara was in town alone. Rhett had stayed home to work on a broken wagon wheel. She'd made the trip several times now without incident, had even started to relax around the stairs and whispers. That was her mistake. She was leaving the general store, arms full of supplies, when someone stuck out a foot. Clara went down hard, packages scattering across the boardwalk. Pain shot through her knee and palms where she'd caught herself. Laughter erupted around her. She looked up to see Lucille and Margaret, along with 3 other girls from the boarding house. They stood in a cluster, grinning down at her like she was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. "Oops," Lucille said, not sounding sorry at all. "Didn't see you there." Clara pushed herself up slowly, ignoring the blood on her palms. "Move. Or what? You'll tell your husband?" Margaret's voice was mocking. "Everyone knows why he married you. He needed a worker he didn't have to pay. That's all you are." "Better than being useless," Clara shot back. The smiles faltered. "You think you're better than us now?" The blonde, Clara finally remembered her name was Violet, demanded. "Just because some broken-down rancher took pity on you?" "I think I work for what I have," Clara said evenly, "which is more than you can say." Lucille's face flushed red. "You're trash. You always were. Marrying Rhett Calder doesn't change that." "Maybe not. But at least I'm not cruel for entertainment." She started gathering her scattered packages. The girls didn't help, just stood there watching with ugly expressions. Clara had almost finished when Violet kicked one of the packages into the street. "Oops," she said, echoing Lucille. Something in Clara snapped. She straightened slowly, packages forgotten. "Do that again." "Or what?" "Find out." For a moment they just stared at each other. Then Violet reached for another package. Clara's fist connected with her nose before she'd fully thought it through. Violet screamed, blood pouring between her fingers. The other girls shrieked and backed away. Clara stood there, shaking, her knuckles throbbing. Around her, people had stopped to stare. "She hit me," Violet wailed. "Someone do something." But no one moved. They just watched, waiting to see what would happen next. Clara picked up her packages, one by one, with as much dignity as she could muster. Her hands were shaking, but she kept her chin up. "Don't touch my things again," she said quietly. Then she walked to the wagon and drove home. Her hands didn't stop shaking until she was halfway there. Rhett was in the yard when Clara pulled up, and he knew something was wrong the moment he saw her face. "What happened?" He crossed to the wagon in 3 strides, eyes scanning her for injury. "You're bleeding." Clara looked down at her scraped palms, the blood already drying in the creases. "It's nothing." "The hell it isn't. Who did this?" "I tripped." Clara. She met his eyes, saw the anger already building there, and felt something inside her crumble. "Some girls from the boarding house. They knocked me down, said things." She flexed her right hand, wincing. "I hit one of them." Rhett went very still. "You hit her?" "She kept coming at me. I wasn't going to just stand there and take it." For a long moment, Rhett said nothing. Then, unexpectedly, his mouth twitched. "Good." Clara blinked. "Good? You stood up for yourself. That's good." He took her hand gently, examining the scrapes. "Come on, let's get you cleaned up." Inside, he pumped water into a basin while Clara sat at the table, still shaking slightly from adrenaline. Rhett knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his much larger ones, and began cleaning the wounds with careful precision. "This is going to sting," he warned, reaching for a bottle of whiskey. It did. Clara hissed through her teeth as the alcohol bit into the raw skin, but she didn't pull away. "Tell me exactly what happened," Rhett said quietly, his focus on her palms. So she did. The whole story, from the trip to the cruel words to Violet's bloody nose. Rhett listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each detail. When she finished, he sat back on his heels. "They're lucky it was just a bloody nose." "Rhett, I mean it. They put their hands on you. That's not nothing." He stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "I should go to town. Have a conversation with those girls." "No." "Clara." I handled it. I don't need you to fight my battles. He turned to face her, frustration clear on his face. You're my wife. That makes it my battle, too. I'm also my own person, and I can take care of myself. They stared at each other, the air between them crackling with tension. Finally, Rhett exhaled roughly. Fine, but if they touch you again, then I'll hit them harder. That surprised a short laugh out of him. You're tougher than you look. I have to be. No, Rhett said, moving back to stand in front of her. You shouldn't have to be, but since you are, I'm glad. He paused, seeming to struggle with something. I'm proud of you. For standing up, for not letting them break you. Clara's throat tightened. Thank you. He nodded, then reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture so unexpected and tender that Clara froze. Rhett seemed to realize what he'd done and pulled his hand back quickly. I should finish fixing that wheel. Rhett, but he was already out the door. Clara sat alone in the kitchen, her palms throbbing, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed listening to the house settle, to Rhett moving restlessly in his own room. Around midnight, she heard his door open and his footsteps on the stairs. Clara waited a few minutes, then followed. She found him on the porch, sitting on the steps with a bottle of whiskey beside him. He didn't turn when she sat down next to him, but he didn't tell her to leave either. Can't sleep? She asked. Never could. He took a drink straight from the bottle, then offered it to her. Clara hesitated, then took it. The whiskey burned going down, making her cough. Rhett's lips twitched. Not much of a drinker. Not much opportunity for it. Well, you're married to me now. Plenty of opportunities. He took the bottle back, stared out at the darkness. My father drank himself to death. Did I tell you that? You mentioned he died. Whiskey and rage, that's what killed him. Everyone said I'd end up the same way. He rolled the bottle between his palms. Maybe they were right about the rage part. You're not your father. How do you know? Because you're here, talking to me instead of drowning in that bottle. Because you work hard and pay your debts and defend people who can't defend themselves. Clara looked at him. Your father do any of that? No. Then you're not him. Rhett was quiet for a long time. Then, you're good at that. At what? Seeing things clearly, without all the mess people usually add. He glanced at her. It's one of the things I like about you. Clara's pulse quickened. One of the things? Yeah. What are the others? He took another drink, considering. You don't give up. You don't complain. You make good coffee. A pause. And you look at me like I'm just a man, not a monster or a project or a warning, just a man. You're just a man. Most people don't think so. Most people are idiots. That got a real laugh out of him, short and surprised, but genuine. You always this blunt? Only when I'm tired and someone's being stupid. Which I am? A little bit, yeah. They sat in comfortable silence, passing the bottle back and forth. The whiskey stopped burning after the third sip, leaving only warmth in its wake. Clara, Rhett said eventually, about earlier, when I touched your hair. Her breath caught. What about it? I shouldn't have. We have an arrangement, and I don't want to make you uncomfortable. You didn't. He looked at her sharply. No? No. Clara took the bottle, drank for courage. I liked it. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. You did, Rhett said slowly, like he was testing the truth of it. Yes. Why? Because it was gentle. And no one's ever been gentle with me before. She met his eyes. No one's ever looked at me the way you do. How do I look at you? Like I matter. Rhett set the bottle aside carefully. You do matter. I know, you said that, but I'm starting to believe it now. Something shifted in his expression, surprise maybe, or realization. You didn't believe it before? Would you? If you spent your whole life being told you were worthless? No, he admitted. I guess I wouldn't. They looked at each other in the moonlight, two broken people slowly figuring out how to be whole. Clara, Rhett said quietly, can I kiss you? Her heart slammed against her ribs. Why? Because I want to, because you're my wife and I'm your husband, and maybe this could be more than just an arrangement. He He paused. But only if you want it to be. Clara thought about all the reasons she should say no, about how this was supposed to be practical, protective, not personal, about how getting close to someone meant giving them the power to hurt you. Then she thought about Rhett's gentleness when he cleaned her wounds, about the way he defended her, believed in her, saw her as someone worth choosing. Yes, she said, you can kiss me. Rhett leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind. When his lips met hers, it was careful, tentative, like he was afraid she might break. Clara kissed him back, and something in her chest cracked wide open. When they pulled apart, Rhett rested his forehead against hers. That okay? More than okay. Good. He pulled back, looking almost shy. We should probably get some sleep. Probably. But neither of them moved. Finally, Rhett stood and offered his hand. Clara took it, let him pull her to her feet. They walked inside together, still holding hands, and paused at the top of the stairs where their rooms diverged. Good night, Clara. Good night, Rhett. He squeezed her hand once, then let go and disappeared into his room. Clara went to bed smiling. The next morning felt different. Not dramatically so. They still ate breakfast in near silence, still split up to handle their respective chores. But there was a new awareness between them, a current of something that hadn't been there before. Clara caught Rhett watching her while she gathered eggs. He didn't look away when she noticed, just smiled slightly and went back to mucking out stalls. It was strange, nice, terrifying. Around noon, a rider appeared on the horizon. Rhett straightened from the fence he was repairing, eyes narrowing. Company. Clara shaded her eyes, squinting at the approaching figure. As it got closer, she recognized the expensive clothes, the perfectly groomed horse. Marcus Thornton. Rhett's expression went cold. Get in the house. No. Clara, I'm not hiding from him. We're doing this together. Rhett looked like he wanted to argue, but Marcus was already pulling up to the yard. Rhett, Marcus called out, dismounting with practiced ease. Thought I'd stop by. Neighborly visit. We're not neighbors, Rhett said flatly. And we're not friends. So state your business and leave. Marcus's smile didn't waver. Direct as always. I like that about you, Rhett. No pretense. His eyes slid to Clara. Mrs. Calder, looking well. Clara said nothing. I heard about the incident in town yesterday, Marcus continued. Your wife assaulting poor Violet Morrison. Terrible business. She defended herself, Rhett said, against a group of girls who attacked her first. That's not how Violet tells it. Violet's a liar. Strong words, but then you've always been quick to violence, haven't you? Marcus's tone was light, conversational. Like father, like son. Rhett went very still. Careful, just making conversation. Marcus spread his hands innocently. Though I do wonder if your wife knows what she's gotten herself into. The Calder temper is legendary around these parts. She knows exactly what she's gotten into, Clara said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. A hard-working man who treats her with respect. More than you can say for most. Marcus's smile thinned. Spirited. I can see why you like her, Rhett. She's got bite. He paused. Though I wonder how long that'll last once she realizes what everyone else knows. Which is, Rhett's voice was dangerously quiet, that you're broken, damaged, that sooner or later you'll hurt her the way your father hurt your mother. Rhett moved so fast Clara barely registered it. One moment he was standing beside her, the next he had Marcus by the throat, lifting him off his feet. I am not my father, Rhett said, each word precise and cold. And if you ever come to my ranch again, if you ever speak to my wife again, I will break you. Understood? Marcus's face was turning purple, but he managed a strangled nod. Rhett dropped him. Marcus stumbled backward, coughing, eyes watering. Get out, Rhett said. Marcus climbed onto his horse, still wheezing. You'll regret this, Calder. I promise you that. I doubt it. Marcus rode off at speed, kicking up dust. Clara watched him go, then turned to Rhett. He was breathing hard, fists still clenched, the violence barely contained beneath his skin. Rhett, she said softly. He didn't look at her. I'm sorry, you shouldn't have seen that. Why not? Because it proves him right. I am like my father, violent, angry, dangerous. Clara stepped in front of him, forcing him to meet her eyes. Your father beat your mother. You defended your wife. Those aren't the same thing. I almost killed him, but you didn't. You stopped. You controlled it. She took his hands, felt them trembling. That's the difference. That's what makes you nothing like him. You don't know that. Yes, I do, because I've seen you angry, and I've never been afraid you'd hurt me. Not once. She squeezed his hands. You're a good man, Rhett Calder, and nothing Marcus Thornton says can change that. Rhett stared at her for a long moment. Then he pulled her into a fierce hug, burying his face in her hair. Clara held him, feeling the tension slowly drain from his body. Thank you, he murmured against her hair. For what? For not running, for staying, for believing in me when no one else does. I'll always stay, Clara promised. Always. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped around each other in the middle of the dusty yard, two people choosing each other over and over again. The days that followed were tense. Word spread about Marcus's visit and Rhett's reaction. People in town started giving Clara even stranger looks, part pity, part fear, like they expected her to show up beaten or worse. It made her furious. Let them talk, Rhett said when she ranted about it one evening. They've always talked about me, about us. It doesn't change anything. It makes me angry. Good. Use that anger. Channel it into something productive. Like what? He smiled slightly. Whatever you want. So Clara threw herself into improving the ranch. She expanded the garden, fixed the sagging porch rail, organized the tack room until every piece of equipment had its place. When Beth Ann and Sarah visited, she recruited them to help paint the barn. You're making this place look almost respectable, Beth joked, wiping paint from her cheek. People might think Rhett Calder's gone soft. He's not soft, Clara said. He just finally has help, and a wife who isn't afraid to work, Anne added. She studied Clara thoughtfully. You're good for him, you know. I've never seen Rhett this settled. Settled? Less angry, more human. Sarah grinned. Marcus Thornton's been telling everyone Rhett's finally lost it completely, but honestly, I think he's found it, whatever it is. The word stayed with Clara long after the women left. That night, she brought it up with Rhett as they sat on the porch. Sarah said you seem more settled. Do I? I don't know. Do you feel more settled? Rhett considered the question. Yeah, I do. Everything feels easier with you here, like I'm not fighting the whole world alone anymore. You're not alone. You have me. I know. He reached over, took her hand. That's what makes it easier. They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching the stars emerge. Clara, Rhett said eventually, I've been thinking. About? About us. This arrangement. This marriage. He turned to look at her. It's not really an arrangement anymore, is it? Her heart stuttered. What is it then? Something real. At least that's what it feels like to me. He paused. Is that okay? Clara thought about the question seriously. Thought about how her life had changed since coming to this ranch. How she'd gone from being invisible to being essential. How Rhett looked at her like she mattered, touched her like she was precious, defended her like she was worth defending. It's more than okay, she said. It's what I want. Relief flooded Rhett's face. Yeah? Yeah. He pulled her closer, and she went willingly, tucking herself against his side. They sat like that until the cold drove them inside, neither wanting to break the moment. But moments, Clara was learning, never lasted as long as you wanted them to. The storm that had been building finally broke 2 weeks later. Clara was in town alone again. Rhett had reluctantly agreed to let her go, but only after she promised to come straight home if there was any trouble. She'd just finished loading supplies into the wagon when Sheriff Coleman approached. Mrs. Calder, got a minute? Clara's stomach tightened. What is it? Need to ask you about the incident with Miss Morrison, the one where you hit her. She attacked me first. I was defending myself. That's your version. Miss Morrison says different, says you came at her unprovoked. Clara stared at him. And you believe her? I believe there are witnesses who back up her story. Witnesses who were her friends, who were standing right there when they tripped me. Coleman shifted uncomfortably. Look, I'm just trying to get the facts straight, but there's talk of pressing charges. Assault. This is ridiculous. Maybe so, but I need you to come by the office tomorrow, give an official statement. Fine, I'll bring my husband. Coleman's expression flickered. That's probably not necessary. I'll bring my husband, Clara repeated firmly. Tomorrow afternoon. She climbed into the wagon and drove home, anger simmering in her chest. Rhett was in the barn when she arrived. One look at her face and he set down the tool he was holding. What happened? Clara told him. All of it. By the time she finished, Rhett's jaw was tight with barely controlled fury. They're trying to charge you with assault. Looks like it. For defending yourself. Yes. Rhett paced the length of the barn, hands flexing like he wanted to hit something. This is Marcus. Has to be. He's behind this. What do you mean? The Morrison girl, Violet. Her father works for Marcus. This is his way of getting back at me. Through you. Rhett stopped pacing, turned to face her. I should have killed him when I had the chance. Rhett, I'm serious. This is my fault. My past, my enemies, and you're paying the price. Clara crossed to him, gripped his arms. Stop. This isn't your fault, and we'll handle it together. How? We'll go to the sheriff tomorrow. I'll give my statement. We'll tell the truth. And if that's not enough, then we'll figure something else out. She looked him straight in the eye. But we do it together, you and me. Understand? Rhett searched her face, then pulled her into a tight embrace. I don't deserve you. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. That night, neither of them slept much. Clara lay in bed listening to Rhett pace in his room, the floorboards creaking with each restless step. Around 2 a.m, she gave up and went to find him. He was sitting on the floor of his room, back against the bed, staring at nothing. Can't sleep? Clara asked from the doorway. Keep thinking about tomorrow, about what happens if they charge you, if you end up in jail because of me. That's not going to happen. You don't know that. Clara crossed the room and sat down beside him. Then we'll deal with it. But stop taking responsibility for other people's cruelty. You didn't trip me. You didn't spread lies. You didn't decide to press charges. None of this is on you. It feels like it is. Well, it's not. She leaned her head against his shoulder. You're not responsible for the whole world, Rhett. Just yourself. Just us. He put his arm around her, pulled her closer. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just tired of being afraid. They sat in silence for a while, drawing comfort from each other's presence. Clara, Rhett said quietly, if something happens tomorrow, if they do charge you, I want you to know I'll do whatever it takes to fix it, whatever it costs. I know. I mean it. I'll sell the ranch if I have to, pay off whoever needs paying. I won't let you take the fall for this. Clara lifted her head to look at him. You'd give up everything for me? In a heartbeat. The certainty in his voice made her throat tight. Why? Because you're my wife. Because you matter more than any of this. He gestured vaguely at the room, the ranch beyond. Because losing you would be worse than losing everything else combined. Clara kissed him then, hard and desperate, trying to pour everything she couldn't say into the contact. When they broke apart, Rhett rested his forehead against hers. Stay here tonight, with me. I don't want to be alone. Okay? They climbed into his bed together, fully clothed, and held each other until dawn broke through the window. The sheriff's office was packed when they arrived the next afternoon. Violet Morrison was there with her father, a weaselly man who worked as Marcus Thornton's foreman. Lucille and Margaret stood nearby, whispering behind their hands. And in the corner, looking entirely too pleased with himself, was Marcus. Rhett's hand tightened on Clara's arm. He's here. I see him. Sheriff Coleman looked uncomfortable when he saw the crowd. This was supposed to be a simple statement. Nothing simple when it involves my wife, Rhett said coldly. Look, let's just get through this. Coleman pulled out a notebook. Mrs. Calder, in your own words, what happened 2 weeks ago outside the general store? Clara took a breath and told the truth. All of it. The tripping, the cruel words, the package being kicked into the street. How she'd warned Violet to stop. How Violet had reached for another package and Clara had finally snapped. When she finished, Coleman looked at Violet. That how you remember it? No, sir. Violet's voice was small, timid. She just came at me. No warning, no reason. That's a lie, Clara said flatly. Are you calling my daughter a liar? Mr. Morrison stepped forward, face red. If she's lying, yes. Why you? Rhett moved between them, his bulk suddenly menacing. Finish that sentence. I dare you. Morrison paled but held his ground. Your wife assaulted my daughter. There are witnesses. Witnesses who were part of the attack, Clara said. Of course they're backing up Violet's story. So it's your word against theirs, Coleman said tiredly. Not exactly, a new voice cut in. Everyone turned to see Beth Cooper standing in the doorway, Anne and Sarah flanking her. We have witnesses too, Beth said, walking into the office with the confidence of someone who knew she belonged. I was across the street that day. Saw the whole thing. Coleman's eyebrows rose. You did? Yes, sir. Those girls tripped Mrs. Calder, mocked her while she was down, then deliberately kicked her packages into the street. She warned them to stop. They didn't listen, so she defended herself. That's exactly what happened, Anne confirmed. We'll swear to it, Sarah added. Violet's face went white. Lucille and Margaret suddenly found the floor very interesting. Marcus pushed off the wall where he'd been leaning. Convenient. Calder's wife's friends backing up her story. We're not her friends, Beth said coldly. We're her neighbors, and we're telling the truth, which is more than can be said for some people in this room. She looked directly at Marcus. Everyone knows you're behind this, using that poor girl to settle your grudge against Rhett. That's a serious accusation, Marcus said, but his smile was strained. It's the truth. Beth turned back to Coleman. Are you going to charge her or not? Coleman looked between Clara and Violet, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. Based on conflicting testimony, I don't think we have enough to move forward with charges. What? Morrison exploded. But my daughter said one thing. Mrs. Calder and 3 witnesses said another. Without more evidence, my hands are tied. Coleman closed his notebook. Case dismissed. Violet burst into tears. Her father started shouting. Marcus's expression went dark. But Clara barely heard any of it. She was looking at Beth, Anne, and Sarah, 3 women who'd stood up for her when they didn't have to. Thank you, she said quietly. Beth smiled. That's what friends do. Outside, Rhett pulled Beth aside while Clara waited by the wagon. I owe you, he said. All of you. Name your price. Don't want your money, Rhett. Just want you to take care of her. Beth glanced at Clara. She's good people. Deserves better than what this town's given her. She does. And I will. Good. Beth paused. You're good people too, you know, always have been. Just took the right person to see it. Rhett didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. On the ride home, Clara was quiet. You okay? Rhett asked. I'm thinking. About? About how I spent my whole life thinking I had to do everything alone. That asking for help was weakness. That needing people made me vulnerable. She looked at him. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe needing people, the right people, makes you stronger. I think you're right. When did we get so smart? Rhett laughed. We're not smart. We're just lucky. Lucky we found each other. Lucky the town didn't run us both out. Day's not over yet. But he was smiling when he said it. That night, they celebrated with whiskey and leftover stew and the quiet satisfaction of having won a battle they'd been expected to lose. You know what Marcus is going to do next, right? Clara said as they sat on the porch, passing the bottle back and forth. Try to destroy us some other way. Yeah, I know. Doesn't that scare you? Terrifies me, but not enough to give up. Rhett looked at her. Is it enough to scare you? Clara thought about it. About everything she'd endured to get here. About how far she'd come from that miserable girl in the boarding house who thought she deserved nothing. No, she said. I'm not scared anymore. Good. Because I'm going to need you for whatever comes next. You've got me. For whatever comes next. She paused. For everything. Rhett took her hand, laced their fingers together. Everything's a long time. I know. You sure about this? About me? About us? Clara looked at their joined hands, at this man who'd given her a home and a purpose and something she'd never had before, a future worth fighting for. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. And for the first time since she could remember, Clarabelle Calder meant it. The certainty didn't last. 2 days after the incident at the sheriff's office, Clara was in the garden when she heard the sound of hoofbeats. Multiple riders coming fast. She straightened, dirt falling from her hands, and looked toward the road. 6 men on horseback appeared over the rise, led by Marcus Thornton. They weren't riding casually, they were riding with purpose. Clara's heart kicked hard against her ribs. She dropped the trowel and ran for the barn where Rhett was shoeing one of the horses. Rhett. He looked up at the urgency in her voice. What's wrong? Marcus. 6 men with him, coming here. Rhett's expression went cold and flat. He set down the horse's hoof carefully, reached for the rifle mounted on the wall. Get in the house. Lock the doors. No. Clara, we do this together. You said that, remember? He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded sharply. Stay behind me, and if I tell you to run, you run. Understood? Understood. They walked out into the yard together as Marcus and his men pulled up in a cloud of dust. Marcus sat easy in his saddle, smiling like he'd already won something. Rhett Calder, we need to talk. Then talk, from right where you are. Marcus's smile widened, not very hospitable. But then you never were. He gestured to the men flanking him, rough types, the kind who got paid to intimidate. I've come about a business matter. I don't do business with you. You might want to reconsider. See, I've been thinking about your situation here. This ranch, all this land, must be hard managing it all by yourself. I'm not by myself. Right. You've got your wife. Marcus's eyes slid to Clara with obvious contempt, though I'm not sure she counts for much. Rhett's grip on the rifle tightened. Careful. Just stating facts. Point is, I'm willing to make you an offer. A generous one. I'll buy your land. Give you enough money to start over somewhere else. Somewhere people don't know your history. This land isn't for sale. Everything's for sale at the right price. Not this. Not to you. Rhett's voice was steel. Now get off my property. Marcus's smile finally faded. You're making a mistake, Calder. Wouldn't be my first. This land should have been mine years ago. Your father lost it in a card game to mine, then somehow weaseled his way into getting it back. It's Thornton land, always has been. That's not how the law sees it. The law can be persuaded to see things differently. Marcus leaned forward in his saddle. I'm giving you one chance to do this the easy way. Take my money. Leave. Start fresh. And if I don't, then things get difficult for you and your wife. Accidents happen on ranches. Fences break. Livestock wander off. Buildings catch fire. He paused. People get hurt. Clara felt ice slide down her spine. This wasn't just intimidation. It was a threat. Rhett raised the rifle slowly, deliberately, until it was pointed at Marcus's chest. You just threatened my wife. The men behind Marcus shifted nervously, hands moving toward their own weapons. Easy, Rhett, Marcus said, but his voice had lost its mocking edge. I'm just being realistic about the dangers of ranch life. You listen to me very carefully. Rhett's voice was quiet, deadly calm. If anything happens to this ranch, if anything happens to my wife, I will know it was you. And I will come for you. Not the law, not the sheriff. Me. And when I do, no amount of money or hired guns will save you. Understood? Marcus's jaw tightened. For a moment, the 2 men stared at each other, violence crackling in the air between them. Then Marcus pulled his horse around. You're going to regret this, Calder. Mark my words. I already regret not killing you when I had the chance. Marcus and his men rode off, leaving Clara and Rhett standing in the yard, tension still thrumming through the air. Clara waited until they were out of sight before speaking. He meant it. About the threats. I know. So what do we do? Rhett lowered the rifle, but his expression remained hard. We prepare. We watch. And we don't let our guard down. Rhett, he's been trying to get this land for years. His father wanted it. Now he wants it. But it's mine. It's ours. He looked at her. And I'm not giving it up. Clara nodded, though fear sat heavy in her stomach. Then we fight. Then we fight. That night, Rhett barely slept. Clara could hear him moving through the house, checking locks, looking out windows. Around midnight, she went downstairs and found him on the porch, rifle across his lap, staring out at the darkness. You can't stay awake forever, she said softly. Can try. Clara sat down beside him. Talk to me. What are you thinking? That I brought this on you, that you'd be safer if you'd never met me. Probably. But I'd also be miserable. He looked at her, surprised. You'd rather be in danger with me than safe without me? Every time. She took his hand. Stop trying to push me away. It won't work. I'm not trying to push you away. I'm trying to protect you. Same thing sometimes. Rhett was quiet for a moment, then sighed. I don't know how to do this, how to be married, how to let someone matter this much. Neither do I, but we're figuring it out together. What if I mess it up? Then we'll fix it, together. Clara squeezed his hand. Stop carrying everything alone. That's what I'm here for. He pulled her close, and they sat in silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. The attacks started small. A section of fence cut during the night. 2 chickens missing. A broken wagon wheel that could have been an accident, but probably wasn't. Rhett dealt with each incident grimly, repairing the damage, increasing his patrols. But Clara could see the toll it was taking, the exhaustion in his eyes, the constant vigilance wearing him down. You need help, she said one morning after they'd discovered another cut fence. You can't do this alone. Who would I hire? Anyone from town would be working for Marcus within a week. Then we ask Beth's husband, Ann's, people we can trust. Rhett looked skeptical. They have their own ranches to run. So we help each other. Isn't that what neighbors do? He considered it, then nodded slowly. All right, we can ask. That afternoon they rode to Beth's ranch. Her husband, Tom Cooper, was a quiet man with steady eyes and work-worn hands. He listened to Rhett's explanation without interruption. Marcus Thornton's been trying to run you off, Tom said when Rhett finished. Looks like it. And you need help watching the place. I know it's asking a lot. I'll do it. Tom stood, brushed dirt from his pants. Marcus has been squeezing small ranchers for years. Time someone stood up to him. He paused. Besides, you helped me last winter when my barn roof collapsed. I owe you. Rhett blinked. You don't owe me anything. Well, I'm helping anyway. Over the next week, a network quietly formed. Tom and his sons took turns patrolling Calder land at night. Ann's husband, Frank Miller, helped repair the damaged fences and installed better locks. Even Sarah's young husband pitched in, bringing supplies from town when Rhett couldn't leave the ranch. Clara watched it all with something close to wonder. These people, who had no reason to risk Marcus Thornton's anger, were doing it anyway. For Rhett. For her. You have more friends than you think, she told Rhett one evening. I don't have friends. I have people who are willing to help. That's what friends are. He grunted, but Clara saw the way his expression softened, the way he looked at Tom and Frank and the others with something that might have been gratitude. For 3 weeks, the system worked. The attacks stopped, probably because Marcus's men couldn't get close enough without being spotted. But Clara knew it wouldn't last. Marcus wasn't the type to give up. She was right. The fire started just after midnight on a moonless night. Clara woke to the smell of smoke and Rhett shouting her name. She stumbled out of bed, confused and terrified, to find him at her door. The barn's on fire. We need to get the horses out. They ran. The barn was already engulfed when they reached it, flames licking up the walls, smoke pouring from the open doors. The horses inside were screaming, high-pitched sounds of pure terror that cut through the night. Rhett didn't hesitate. He ran straight into the inferno. Rhett, no! But he was already gone, swallowed by smoke and flame. Clara stood frozen for a heartbeat, then grabbed a bucket and ran for the water trough. She couldn't fight the fire, but she could try to slow it down. She was on her 4th bucket when Rhett emerged leading 2 panicked horses. He shoved the reins at her. Get them clear! There are more inside. I know. He disappeared back into the smoke. Clara got the horses to safety and ran back. Tom Cooper was suddenly there, appearing out of the darkness with his sons. They formed a bucket line, passing water from the trough to the fire. It wasn't enough. The barn was going to burn, but they could save the horses. Rhett made 3 more trips into that burning building. 3 more times, Clara watched him vanish into the flames and prayed he'd come back out. On the last trip, part of the roof collapsed. Clara screamed. For a terrible moment, there was nothing but smoke and flame and falling timber. Then Rhett stumbled out, coughing violently, the last horse behind him. He collapsed to his knees in the dirt, chest heaving. Clara ran to him. His face was black with soot, his hands blistered from the heat. But he was alive. "You stupid, stupid man," she sobbed, grabbing his face. "You could have died." "Horses," he managed between coughs. "I don't care about the horses. I care about you." He looked at her, surprise cutting through the pain. "Clara, don't you ever do that again. Don't you ever risk yourself like that. I can't." Her voice broke. "I can't lose you." Rhett pulled her close, and they held each other while the barn burned behind them, while Tom and his sons kept fighting the fire to keep it from spreading to the house. By dawn, the barn was gone, just a smoking ruin, the skeleton of timber black and twisted. The horses were safe. The house was intact. And Rhett was alive, though his hands were wrapped in bandages and his lungs ached with every breath. Sheriff Coleman showed up mid-morning, looking grim. "Got a report about a fire." "As you can see," Rhett said hoarsely. Coleman walked the perimeter of the burned barn, examining the wreckage. When he came back, his expression was troubled. "Found evidence of accelerant. This wasn't an accident." "I know." "You want to file a report?" "What's the point? We both know who did it." "Marcus Thornton?" "Who else?" Coleman sighed. "I can't arrest him without proof." "Then what good are you?" "Rhett, get off my property. You've done your job. You've confirmed it was arson. Now leave me alone." Coleman left, and Rhett stood staring at the ruins of his barn, his jaw tight with suppressed rage. Clara approached carefully. "What do we do now?" "I don't know. We could leave. Take Marcus's offer. Start over somewhere else." Rhett turned to look at her, something dangerous in his eyes. "Is that what you want?" "I want us to be safe." "We won't be safe anywhere as long as Marcus thinks he can push people around." His hands clenched despite the bandages. "If we run, he wins, and he'll just do this to someone else. So we stay. We stay." He paused. "Unless you want to leave. I'd understand if you did." Clara looked at the charred remains of the barn, at the house they'd worked so hard to make a home, at Rhett standing there battered but unbroken. "I'm not leaving," she said. "This is our home, our land, and we're not giving it up." Something fierce and proud flashed in Rhett's eyes. "Then we rebuild." They started that same day. Tom and Frank showed up with lumber and tools. Beth, Ann, and Sarah brought food and medical supplies. Even people Clara didn't know well arrived to help, small ranchers, townspeople who'd been hurt by Marcus Thornton's greed. "He's gone too far this time," one man said as he helped clear debris. "People are tired of being scared." Over the next 2 weeks, a new barn rose from the ashes of the old one. It wasn't fancy, but it was solid, strong, built by people who refused to be intimidated. Marcus stayed away, probably waiting to see if the fire had broken them. It hadn't. If anything, it had made them stronger. Clara stood beside Rhett on the evening they finished the barn, watching the sunset paint the new timber gold. "We did it," she said softly. "We did. He's going to try again." "I know." "What then?" Rhett was quiet for a long moment. "Then we face it. Together." Clara took his hand, his bandaged, blistered hand, and held it gently. Together. That night, as they sat on the porch in their usual spot, Rhett spoke quietly. "I need to tell you something." Clara's stomach tightened. "What?" "I'm going to confront Marcus. Tomorrow. End this once and for all." "Rhett, no. It's the only way. As long as he thinks he can get away with this, it won't stop. The fire was just the beginning." "Then I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not. You don't get to decide that. Clara, he's dangerous. I won't risk you. And I won't let you face him alone." She turned to look at him, her expression fierce. "We're a team, remember? You and me. That means I don't sit home safe while you ride into danger. This is different." "How?" "Because if something happens to you, I won't survive it." The words came out raw, honest. "I can handle anything else, but not that." Clara's eyes stung. "Then don't ask me to survive losing you, because I won't. Not anymore. You're—" She swallowed hard. "You're everything to me now. Everything." Rhett stared at her, something breaking open in his expression. "Clara, I love you. The words tumbled out, surprising them both. I know this wasn't supposed to be that kind of marriage, but I love you, and I'm not letting you do this alone. For a moment, Rhett said nothing. Then he pulled her into a crushing embrace. I love you too, he whispered against her hair. I've loved you since you punched Violet Morrison in the face and didn't apologize. Clara laughed, the sound wet with tears. That's what did it. That's when I knew for sure that you were mine and I was yours and nothing else mattered. They held each other as the stars emerged, two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their lives and built something unbreakable. So, Clara said eventually, tomorrow, we go together. Rhett pulled back to look at her. Together? What's the plan? Honestly, I don't have one. Just going to ride to his ranch and force a confrontation. That's a terrible plan. You have a better one? Clara thought about it. About Marcus's arrogance, his certainty that fear and money could control anyone, about the way he'd underestimated her from the beginning. Actually, she said slowly, I might. The next morning, Clara and Rhett rode into town together. But instead of heading to Marcus Thornton's ranch, they went straight to the newspaper office. The editor, a weathered man named Harrison Gray, looked up in surprise when they entered. Rhett Calder, don't think you've ever been in here before. I haven't, but I need something printed. Front page, if possible. Gray's eyebrows rose. What kind of something? An advertisement. Offering a reward for information leading to the arrest of whoever burned down my barn. How much of a reward? $500. Gray whistled. That's serious money. It's a serious crime. You sure you want to do this? Putting a bounty like that out there, you're going to get all kinds of people coming forward, most of them lying. I'm counting on it, Clara said. We want people talking. We want Marcus Thornton to know that we're not backing down, that we're willing to pay to see justice done. Gray studied them both, then nodded slowly. I'll run it. Edition comes out tomorrow. Thank you. As they left the newspaper office, Rhett looked at Clara with something like admiration. You're smarter than me. I'm just thinking like someone who's always had to fight with words instead of fists. She paused. Marcus uses fear and money, so we use those things back on him. Make him afraid. Make him wonder who might talk. You think someone will? I think Marcus has made a lot of enemies, and $500 is more money than most people around here see in a year. Clara took his arm. Someone knows something. Someone always knows something. She was right. 3 days after the newspaper ran the advertisement, a man named Walter Green showed up at the ranch. He was Marcus Thornton's stable hand, nervous and twitchy, looking over his shoulder like he expected to be followed. I know about the fire, he said, without preamble. I can prove Marcus ordered it. Rhett and Clara exchanged glances. Keep talking, Rhett said. I was there the night it happened. Heard Marcus talking to the men he hired. Told them to burn your barn, make it look like an accident. Said he'd pay them $200 each. Walter swallowed hard. I didn't want no part of it, but I was scared to say anything. Marcus, he's got a mean streak. People who cross him tend to have accidents. Why come forward now? Because I got kids. And I've been thinking about what I'm teaching them, staying quiet while bad things happen. He looked at Clara. And because $500 means I can move my family somewhere safer, start over. Clara felt a surge of something that might have been hope. Will you testify to what you heard? Yes, ma'am, if you promise to keep my family safe. We promise, Rhett said. Walter nodded. Then let's get this bastard. Sheriff Coleman was less than enthusiastic when they brought Walter to his office. This is a serious accusation, he said, looking uncomfortable. Marcus Thornton is a respected businessman. Marcus Thornton is an arsonist, Clara said flatly, and we have a witness. One witness, who just happens to be motivated by a $500 reward. I'm motivated by doing what's right, Walter said quietly. The money's just what makes it possible. Coleman sighed. Even if I believe you, which I'm not saying I do, going after Marcus is complicated. He's got lawyers, connections, money. He's also got no alibi for the night of the fire, Clara pointed out. And if you get a warrant to search his property, I bet you find evidence. The men he hired, records of payment. You've thought about this. I've thought about very little else. Coleman studied her for a long moment. Then he stood. All right, I'll get a warrant, but this better be solid, because if it's not, Marcus will bury all of us." "It's solid," Walter said. The warrant was executed the next day. Coleman and 2 deputies rode out to Thornton's ranch with Rhett and Clara following at a distance. They watched from the road as Coleman searched the property, questioned the staff, went through Marcus's records. It took hours. Finally, just as the sun was setting, Coleman emerged with Marcus in handcuffs. Marcus's face was purple with rage. "This is a mistake. I'll have your badge, Coleman." "Save it for the judge." Coleman loaded him into a wagon. "You're under arrest for arson and conspiracy to commit arson." As they rode past where Rhett and Clara were watching, Marcus's eyes locked on Clara's. The hatred there was palpable. "This isn't over," he snarled. "Yes," Clara said calmly, "it is." The trial was set for 3 weeks later. In that time, Clara and Rhett lived in a strange state of suspended animation. The immediate danger was gone, but they both knew Marcus had meant what he said. From jail, he was still dangerous. "His lawyers are going to try to tear Walter apart on the stand," Rhett said one evening. "Then we make sure he's ready for it." "We? You didn't think I was going to let you handle this alone, did you?" Rhett smiled despite himself. "No, I guess not." They spent the next weeks preparing. Walter went over his testimony until he could recite it in his sleep. Clara and Rhett gathered every piece of evidence they could find: burn patterns, witness statements, anything that could support their case. The day of the trial, the courthouse was packed. Everyone in town showed up to watch Marcus Thornton finally face justice. Marcus sat at the defendant's table looking supremely confident, flanked by 2 expensive lawyers from the territorial capital. He didn't even glance at Clara and Rhett. The trial lasted 2 days. Walter testified first, his voice shaking but clear. He told the court exactly what he'd heard, what he'd seen. Marcus's lawyers tried to discredit him, but Walter held firm. Then the prosecution called a surprise witness, one of the men Marcus had hired to set the fire. He'd been caught trying to leave the territory and had agreed to testify in exchange for a reduced sentence. His testimony was damning. Marcus had paid him $200, given him specific instructions, told him to make it look like an accident. When it was Marcus's turn to testify, his arrogance finally cracked. He denied everything, but his rage made him sloppy. He contradicted himself, attacked the judge, and finally lost his temper completely when the prosecutor asked about his long-standing grudge against Rhett. "That land should be mine," Marcus shouted. "The Calders stole it from my family. Rhett's father was a drunk and a cheat, and his son is no better." "So you decided to take justice into your own hands," the prosecutor said calmly. "I decided to take what was rightfully mine." The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel, calling for order, but the damage was done. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Guilty on all counts. Marcus was sentenced to 10 years in the territorial prison. As they led him away, he looked back at Clara and Rhett one last time. The hatred was still there, but so was something else. Defeat. Outside the courthouse, Clara and Rhett stood in the late afternoon sun, processing what had just happened. "It's over," Clara said, like she couldn't quite believe it. "It's over," Rhett agreed. Around them, people approached to offer congratulations. Tom and Beth, Frank and Anne, Sarah and her husband, even people they barely knew offering handshakes and words of support. "You did good," Tom said, clapping Rhett on the shoulder. "Stood up to a bully and won." "We all did good," Rhett corrected. "Couldn't have done it without all of you." As the crowd dispersed and they walked toward their wagon, Clara felt something settle in her chest. Relief. Peace. The sense that maybe, finally, they could breathe. "What do you want to do now?" Rhett asked as he helped her into the wagon. Clara thought about it. About the ranch waiting for them, the new barn, the life they'd built together. About everything they'd survived and everything that still lay ahead. "I want to go home," she said. "Our home." Rhett smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his whole face. "Then let's go home." They rode back to the ranch as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. And for the first time since Clara had arrived at this place, she felt something she'd never expected to feel. Safe. Safe didn't mean the work stopped. The ranch still needed constant attention, the animals still needed feeding, and the new barn needed finishing touches that would take months to complete. But the difference now was the weight that had lifted. Clara and Rhett could work without looking over their shoulders, without waiting for the next attack. The first week after the trial, they fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Rhett worked on reinforcing the barn's structure while Clara tended the expanded garden and the chickens. In the evenings, they sat on the porch together, not always talking, just existing in each other's presence. It was on one of those quiet evenings that Mrs. Pemberton appeared. Clara saw the boarding house matron climbing down from a hired carriage and felt her entire body tense. Rhett noticed immediately. "Want me to send her away?" he asked quietly. "No, I can handle this." But Rhett stood with her anyway, a solid presence at her back. Mrs. Pemberton approached with careful steps, her expression unreadable. When she stopped a few feet away, Clara saw something she'd never expected to see on that pinched face: uncertainty. "Mrs. Calder," the matron said formally, "I hope I'm not intruding. What do you want?" Mrs. Pemberton flinched slightly at the bluntness. "I came to apologize." Clara blinked. "What?" "For how I treated you, for sending you here as a joke, for—" She paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "For not seeing your worth when you were under my roof." Rhett's hand found Clara's, squeezed gently. "Why now?" Clara asked. "Because I've been watching. The whole town has. How you stood up to Marcus Thornton, how you built a life here, how you proved everyone wrong about what you could become." Mrs. Pemberton's voice grew softer. "You came to my boarding house broken and hungry, and I treated you like you were less than nothing. I was wrong." Clara didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to throw the apology back in the woman's face, to remind her of every cruel word, every dismissive look. But another part, the part that had learned what grace looked like from Rhett's quiet strength, understood that holding on to anger would only hurt herself. "I accept your apology," Clara said finally. "But I don't forgive you. Not yet, maybe not ever." Mrs. Pemberton nodded. "That's fair. More than fair." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small bundle. "I brought your things, the few items you left behind. I thought you might want them." Clara took the bundle. A worn shawl, a cheap hairbrush, a book with a broken spine. Things she'd forgotten she even owned. "Thank you," she said, surprising herself. Mrs. Pemberton nodded again, then turned and walked back to the carriage. Clara watched her leave, feeling strangely hollow. "You okay?" Rhett asked. "I don't know. That was—" Clara shook her head. "I never thought she'd apologize. People surprise you sometimes, usually in bad ways, but occasionally in good ones." Clara looked down at the bundle in her hands. "I don't even want these things anymore. They're from a life I don't recognize." "Then throw them away. Or keep them as a reminder of how far you've come." Rhett's arm came around her shoulders. "Either way, you're not that person anymore." "No," Clara agreed. "I'm not." That night, she put the bundle in the back of her wardrobe, not quite ready to throw it away, but not wanting to look at it either. Some things, she was learning, you had to keep just to remember what you'd survived. The following week brought more unexpected visitors. Lucille and Margaret showed up on a Saturday afternoon, both looking uncomfortable and defiant at once. Clara was in the garden when they arrived and almost didn't go out to meet them. But curiosity won. "We need to talk to you," Lucille said without preamble. "So talk." "Not here. Can we—" She glanced toward the house. "Inside?" Clara considered refusing, then shrugged. "Fine, but make it quick." They sat at the kitchen table, and Clara waited. Rhett was in the barn, but close enough to hear if she called. That knowledge made her bolder than she might have been otherwise. "We're sorry," Margaret said abruptly, "for how we treated you, for the things we said and did." Clara raised an eyebrow. "Did Mrs. Pemberton send you?" "No, we came ourselves." Lucille twisted her hands in her lap. "We were cruel. We knew it then, and we definitely know it now. And we wanted to tell you that you were right, about everything." "Right about what?" "About us being useless. About working for what we have." Margaret's voice was bitter. "I got kicked out of the boarding house last month. Couldn't pay rent. Mrs. Pemberton gave me the same choice she gave you, find work or leave." And there isn't any work, not for girls like us who never learned how to do anything useful." She looked at Clara with something that might have been envy or regret. You knew how to survive. We just knew how to be pretty and cruel. Clara felt a strange mix of satisfaction and pity. So why are you here? To apologize. And to ask, Lucille hesitated, if maybe you could help us, teach us. We're willing to work, we just don't know how. Clara almost laughed. These girls who'd mocked her, tripped her, made her life miserable, were now asking for her help. Why would I do that? Because you're better than us, Margaret said simply. You always were. And because maybe you understand what it's like to have nowhere else to turn. The words hit harder than Clara expected. She did understand. She remembered the desperation, the fear, the crushing weight of having no options. She also remembered the people who'd helped her when they didn't have to. Beth, Anne, Sarah, even Rhett in his way. I'll think about it, Clara said finally. Relief flooded both girls' faces. Thank you. I said I'll think about it. That's not a yes. Clara stood. Now, leave. I have work to do. After they left, Rhett came in from the barn. Heard voices. Everything okay? Clara told him about the conversation. He listened, his expression thoughtful. You going to help them? I don't know. Part of me wants to tell them to suffer the way they made me suffer. And the other part? The other part remembers what it felt like to be desperate, to have everyone write you off as worthless. She sighed. I don't want to be like them, like the people who turned their backs on me. Rhett pulled her into a hug. Then don't be. Help them or don't, but do it because it's what you want, not because you feel obligated. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just married to someone who makes me think about things differently. Clara decided to help them, not out of kindness or forgiveness, but because she needed help on the ranch, and they needed to learn how to work. It was practical, transactional, and if they couldn't handle it, they'd leave, and she'd be no worse off. Lucille and Margaret showed up the next morning, dressed in their finest clothes. Clara looked them over and shook her head. You can't work in those. Don't you have anything practical? These are our practical clothes, Margaret said. Then go to town and buy work dresses, boots, aprons. Come back when you look like you're ready to get dirty. They did, returning that afternoon in ill-fitting work clothes that still looked too nice. But it was a start. First lesson, Clara said. Nothing here is easy. Everything hurts. You will be tired, sore, and covered in dirt by the end of each day. If you can't handle that, leave now. They stayed. Clara worked them hard, not cruelly but thoroughly. She taught them how to feed chickens without getting pecked, how to gather eggs without breaking them, how to pull weeds without destroying the vegetables. Every task they did wrong, she made them do again. By the end of the first week, both girls were exhausted, covered in bruises and blisters, and complaining constantly. I don't know how you did this alone, Lucille groaned, collapsing on the porch steps. I didn't have a choice, Clara said. That's the difference. You always had choices. You just made bad ones. That's harsh. It's true. Margaret looked up at her, squinting against the sun. Did you always know you were strong, or did you have to learn? Clara paused, considering the question. I learned. Every time someone told me I couldn't do something, every time they laughed or dismissed me, I learned that I had to be stronger than they expected. Eventually, I stopped caring what they thought and just focused on surviving. That's lonely, Lucille said quietly. It was. Until I found people who saw me as something more than a joke. Clara looked toward the barn where Rhett was working. Then it got easier. Over the next month, Lucille and Margaret slowly transformed. They learned to work without complaining. Their soft hands developed calluses. They stopped wearing jewelry and started showing up on time. They weren't friends. Clara didn't trust them enough for that. But they were no longer enemies either. One afternoon, as they were taking a break from weeding, Margaret spoke up. I need to tell you something. Clara looked up. What? Violet Morrison, the girl you punched. She's been saying things about you around town. What kind of things? That you're forcing us to work here. That you're getting revenge by treating us like slaves. Margaret's face was troubled. It's not true, obviously, but people are talking. Clara felt anger flare but pushed it down. Let them talk. They've been talking about me since I arrived. Don't you want to set the record straight? Why? The people who matter know the truth. The rest don't matter. Lucille shook her head wonderingly. You really don't care what people think, do you? I used to. It nearly destroyed me. Clara went back to weeding. Now I only care what I think, and what the people I love think. Everyone else is just noise. That evening, Clara told Rhett about Violet's rumors. Want me to talk to her? He asked. No, I want to ignore her. She's trying to get a reaction, and I won't give her one. You're more patient than I am. I'm not patient. I'm just tired of fighting battles that don't matter. She leaned against him. We won, Rhett. Marcus is in prison. The ranch is ours. We have friends and a life and each other. What does it matter if some bitter girl spreads lies? It matters because those lies could hurt you. Only if I let them. And I won't. Rhett kissed the top of her head. You're amazing. You know that? I'm just done being afraid. The real test came a month later when the town held its annual harvest festival. Clara hadn't planned to go. Public gatherings still made her uncomfortable, and she knew there would be stares and whispers, but Beth convinced her. You can't hide forever, Beth said firmly. You've earned the right to hold your head up in this town. It's time you showed them. So Clara went, wearing her best dress and standing tall beside Rhett. The reactions were mixed. Some people greeted them warmly, others pretended not to see them. And a few, including Violet Morrison and her parents, made their disapproval clear. Clara ignored them all. She and Rhett wandered through the festival, looking at the displays of vegetables and livestock, watching the children play games. It was almost normal. Then the dancing started. Clara watched from the sidelines as couples moved across the makeshift dance floor. She'd never learned to dance, had never been asked. Want to try? Rhett's voice was quiet beside her. I don't know how. Neither do I. We'll figure it out together. He took her hand and led her onto the floor. They were clumsy and offbeat, stepping on each other's feet more often than not. But Clara found herself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in months. Around them people stared, some with disapproval, some with surprise. And some, like Beth and Tom, like Anne and Frank, with warm smiles. Let them look, Rhett said, pulling her closer. Let them see that we don't care what they think. I love you, Clara said impulsively. I love you too. Even if you just stepped on my foot again. Sorry. Don't be. I like your feet, even when they're crushing mine. They danced until the music stopped, until Clara's feet ached and her sides hurt from laughing. When they finally stepped off the floor, she felt lighter than she had in years. The evening was winding down when Violet Morrison approached. Clara tensed, but Rhett's hand on her back steadied her. Mrs. Calder, Violet said stiffly, I wanted to speak with you. Then speak. Violet's face flushed. I wanted to apologize for the lies I've been spreading, for everything. She glanced at her parents, who were watching with tight expressions. My father told me I had to apologize if I wanted to keep my allowance, so I'm apologizing. Clara studied her. The apology was forced, insincere. Violet didn't mean a word of it. I don't accept, Clara said calmly. Violet's eyes widened. What? Your apology? I don't accept it. You're only saying this because you were forced to, not because you mean it. So keep your apology. I don't want it. But, you can tell your father you tried. That should be good enough for him. Clara turned away. We're done here. As they walked away, Rhett chuckled. You're terrifying when you want to be. Good. People should be a little afraid of me. I'm not afraid of you. You should be. I'm the one who cooks your food. Valid point. They rode home under a sky full of stars, the sounds of the festival fading behind them. Clara felt settled in a way she never had before. Not perfectly happy, life was too complicated for that, but content, grounded, home. The word meant something now. Winter came early that year, bringing snow and freezing winds that howled through the gaps in the barn walls. Clara and Rhett prepared as best they could, stockpiling firewood and supplies, making sure the animals had adequate shelter. Lucille and Margaret proved their worth during those hard months. They showed up every day despite the cold, worked without complaint, and slowly became part of the ranch's rhythm. They still weren't friends, but they were reliable, trustworthy. I can't believe we're still here, Margaret said one afternoon as they huddled in the barn, taking a break from the wind. I thought we'd quit after the first week. So did I, Clara admitted. Why didn't you let us? Because I saw something in you that you didn't see in yourselves. Potential. The ability to be more than what you were. Lucille laughed bitterly. We treated you like garbage. Why would you want to help us? Because someone helped me when I needed it, and because holding on to hate would have hurt me more than it hurt you. Clara looked at them both. You're not the same people who tripped me in the street. People can change. I'm proof of that. You didn't change, Margaret said. You were always strong. You just finally got a chance to show it. The words stayed with Clara long after the conversation ended. Maybe Margaret was right. Maybe she hadn't changed so much as shed the weight of other people's expectations. Maybe strength had always been there, buried under layers of shame and fear. Either way, she'd found it, and she wasn't letting it go. Spring arrived with mud and new life. The garden burst into bloom. The chickens laid eggs with renewed enthusiasm. And Clara discovered she was pregnant. The realization hit her one morning when she couldn't keep breakfast down for the third day in a row. She sat on the bathroom floor, head spinning, and did the math. Then she started crying, not from sadness or fear, though there was some of that too, but from overwhelming emotion. She was going to have a child. Rhett's child. A life they'd created together. When she finally pulled herself together enough to tell him, Rhett went very pale. "You're sure?" he asked. "As sure as I can be without seeing a doctor." He sat down heavily at the kitchen table. "A baby?" "Yes." "I don't know how to be a father." "I don't know how to be a mother. We'll figure it out." Clara sat beside him, took his hand. "Are you happy about this?" Rhett looked at her, and his expression cracked open. Terrified. But yes, happy. Me too. He pulled her into his lap and held her like she was made of glass. "I'm going to be better than my father. I swear it." "You already are." The pregnancy was hard. Clara was sick constantly the first few months, exhausted and irritable. But Rhett was patient, taking over more of the ranch work, making sure she rested, bringing her whatever she could keep down. The women rallied around her too. Beth brought herbs for the nausea. Anne showed her how to sew baby clothes. Sarah shared stories about her own difficult pregnancy and how she'd survived. Even Lucille and Margaret stepped up, taking on heavier tasks without being asked. "You should rest more," Lucille said one afternoon when she found Clara trying to weed the garden. "I can't just sit around doing nothing. You're growing a human. That's not nothing." Clara smiled despite herself. "When did you get so bossy?" Learned from the best. By summer, Clara's belly was unmistakable. She moved slowly, awkwardly, her back aching constantly. But she'd never felt more alive. One evening, as she and Rhett sat on the porch watching the sunset, the baby kicked. "Feel this?" Clara said, grabbing Rhett's hand and pressing it to her stomach. His eyes widened when he felt the movement. "That's our child. Our child," he repeated wonderingly. Then he leaned down and spoke to her belly. "Hey you, this is your father. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to try my best. And your mother is the strongest person I've ever met, so you're going to be amazing." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Rhett." "I mean it. You took a broken-down rancher and a falling-apart ranch and turned it into something worth having. You're going to be an incredible mother." "I hope so. I know so." The baby came in October, a month early, and screaming with outrage at being thrust into the cold world. Clara labored for 18 hours, Beth and Anne at her side, Rhett pacing outside the bedroom like a caged animal. When the midwife finally called him in, he entered to find Clara exhausted but smiling, a tiny bundle in her arms. "It's a girl," she said softly. "We have a daughter." Rhett approached slowly, like he was afraid he might break something. When he looked down at the baby, red-faced and wailing, his expression transformed. "She's perfect," he breathed. "She's loud," Clara corrected. "But yes, perfect." "What should we name her?" Clara had thought about this for months. She wanted a name that meant something, that represented the life they'd built together. "Hope," she said. "Her name is Hope." Rhett's eyes shone with unshed tears. "Hope Calder. I like it." He took the baby carefully, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Hope's crying quieted as she settled against her father's chest. "I promise you," Rhett whispered to his daughter, "you will never doubt that you're loved. You will never feel unwanted. And you will grow up knowing that strength isn't about being perfect. It's about surviving and choosing to be kind anyway. Clara watched them together and felt her heart expand to a size she hadn't known was possible. This was what mattered. Not the town's opinions, not the past's pain, just this moment, this family, this life they'd fought so hard to build. The first few months of Hope's life were chaos. She was colicky and demanding, sleeping in short bursts and crying the rest of the time. Clara was exhausted beyond anything she'd ever experienced, and Rhett wasn't much better. But they managed. They took turns walking Hope around the house at night. They learned to function on minimal sleep. They discovered that sometimes love meant just surviving until tomorrow. The women helped. Beth brought meals. Anne gave advice. Sarah watched Hope so Clara could sleep for a few precious hours. Even Lucille and Margaret pitched in, taking over more ranch duties so Rhett could help with the baby. "I never thought I'd be changing a diaper," Margaret said one afternoon when she was watching Hope while Clara cooked dinner. "Life is full of surprises," Clara said. "The good kind, though. Mostly." Margaret looked down at Hope with something soft in her expression. "She's lucky to have you two as parents. We're the lucky ones. I don't know. You took two bitter, useless girls and taught them how to be useful. You gave us a second chance when you had every reason not to." Margaret paused. "You saved our lives, Clara, in every way that matters." Clara didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded. That spring, as Hope learned to crawl and the ranch burst into life again, Clara stood in the garden and looked at everything they'd built. The house with its fresh paint, the sturdy barn, the thriving garden, the chickens scratching in their expanded coop, the horses grazing in the pasture, and inside the house, her husband and daughter, her unlikely family. She'd come here broken and desperate, sent as a joke by people who expected her to fail. They'd underestimated her capacity to endure, her willingness to work, her refusal to accept that she was worthless. More than that, they'd underestimated what could happen when two broken people found each other and chose to build something together. Red emerged from the barn, saw her standing there, and walked over. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, slipping his arm around her waist. "About how far we've come. About how different everything is from what I expected. Better or worse?" "Better. So much better." She leaned against him. "I spent so long thinking I wasn't worth anything, that I didn't deserve happiness or love or a real life. And now I have all of that." "We have all of that," Rhett corrected. "Together." From the house, Hope's delighted laughter drifted out to them, mixing with the sound of Beth's voice as she played with the baby. Clara smiled. Together. They stood in the garden, surrounded by the life they'd built from nothing but determination and stubborn hope, and Clara understood something she'd never quite grasped before. Strength wasn't about being unbreakable. It was about breaking and choosing to rebuild anyway. It was about enduring when endurance seemed impossible. It was about looking at a life that told you that you were worthless and proving it wrong, one small victory at a time. And love, real love, wasn't about being perfect. It was about seeing someone's scars and flaws and choosing them anyway. It was about building something together that neither person could build alone. The town had sent her here to fail, to be humiliated, to prove that she was everything they said she was. Instead, she'd proven that people are more than their worst moments. That redemption is possible. That sometimes the cruelest circumstances lead to the most beautiful outcomes. She'd become Clara Calder, wife, mother, rancher, fighter, survivor, and she'd never been stronger. As the sun set over the ranch, painting everything in shades of gold, Clara took Rhett's hand and led him back toward the house where their daughter waited. Behind them, the garden bloomed. The barn stood solid. The land stretched out in every direction, no longer a prison, but a kingdom they'd built together from dust and determination. The girl no one wanted had become the woman everyone underestimated, and that made all the difference.